Abuse isn't always every day.
Welcome to Mom Mentality, your virtual village of support. I'm Jessica Campbell, your family wellness coach, and I am committed to helping you prioritize your and your family's well-being. This podcast will be like your favorite ladies group chat come to life. We'll share the ups and downs of life for moms just like you, get real advice from coaches and experts, and I'll pop in with my own stories and tips on everyday challenges to the big questions. Whether you're juggling work from home, balancing adult life with parenthood, tackling ADHD, yours or your kids, or just trying to catch a breath, Mom Mentality is your spot. As we all turn on our holiday cheer, I understand that you wear all the hats, but let's not forget you're on the top of the gift list too. This season, give yourself the gift of downtime with Wildflower Pop self-care gift baskets. Imagine a moment just for you, embraced by the warmth of self-love and a peaceful break from your endless to-do list that's now doubled in holiday cheer. If no one has told you lately, you deserve every bit of relaxation. Your sanctuary of serenity awaits. Check out the link in the show notes to grab yours.
We're going to start off with just asking you just to tell me a little bit about yourself and what your life looks like right now.
Well, my name's Taylor and I'm in accounting. So I do accounting for a housing authority, and then I'm just raising my twin boys who are 5 now, mostly on my own. They're my whole life. I mean, they're everything that I do is with them. I hang out with friends here and there or whatever, but they're just the coolest.
Can you tell us a little bit about your life during the time period that you were in this relationship?
So, I mean, I met the boys' dad when I was 18 and he was 24. We met in college. He was in my psychology class, which is pretty ironic now that I think about it. But he sat next to me. I'd copy off of his homework and giggle, and we just grew fond of each other. And eventually we started dating. At the time, he was in school to be a social worker, and his current job was that he worked at a Christian-friendly agency where he would play basketball with the youth and, teach them about Jesus and
Right. Wow.
stuff. Yep. And so, I mean, of course, at the time, being 18 and not really growing up in a religious background, I was intrigued by that and intrigued by somebody that had direction. And he started kind of preaching to me and, teaching me about the Bible and what you should and shouldn't do. And that's kind of how I got wrapped up into this thing. So we were together for 9 years. And for the first couple of years, it was, he kind of used religion to isolate me. So he would say, you can't see your friends and family like just for a little bit, but it's just because you need to focus on God. You need to focus on God. You need to start learning more about the Bible, and you need to focus on us. And that's kind of where the manipulation started. Right. Over the years, it just became worse and worse. I mean, there were probably a few months in the beginning where he was nice, but then after that, it was just like, you need to work on this, and why aren't you doing this? And shouldn't be speaking to your friends. You shouldn't be hanging out with them. You should, it just
like they're a bad influence kind of thing. Like now that you're living,
like they weren't of God, so why would you speak to them? And then eventually, he started getting more aggressive, and it was, you shouldn't be wearing these outfits this way. Why would you wear these outfits? You're obviously taken, you're with somebody. Why would you do that? And then he would like go on these rants. He would sit me down and he would just talk for like hours and hours and hours, just in circles, about how I wasn't doing what he had said, or how just that I wasn't like meeting his expectations.
Right.
It was just never good enough. But I mean, these lectures, I mean, they would be like 4 or 5 hours long. He wouldn't let me go to the bathroom. He wouldn't let me leave. And I just wanted to make him happy. After a few years, it was just like, you start to love this person, and you think that this person is doing the right thing, and that this person is just like trying to make you grow.
Right.
Trying to make you a better person. And I mean, he wasn't. He was just doing all of those telltale signs of like manipulation and isolation, and
like trying to conform you to his way. Yeah.
Correct. And there was nobody around, because eventually my friends were in college, or eventually when you don't show up to things or you don't hang out with them or check in, they don't know what's going on. And so eventually you're just alone with no friends, in my 20s. I remember one time, so I wasn't allowed to have social media.
Mm,
So I would still have a Facebook that I would look at here and there or whatever that
right.
he didn't know about. And I mean, one time it got so bad because I was walking out of work, and of course he had my car the whole day and he was using my car while I was at work, and he comes to pick me up, and my coworker, as I'm leaving, is like, "Have fun at the wedding. Make sure to Snapchat all about it." Like, she, it was harmless. She didn't know any
Right.
better.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it was just like my stomach just sank, because I just knew
Right.
that.
So
And
here we go.
I got in the car and we start driving, and, he starts screaming at me and screaming, "How could you do this?" or lying to me. And then he started hitting me while I was driving, and he hit me so hard that my contacts fell out, and I ended up having to stop on Avenue of the Cities and put the car in park and just like run out of the car, and went to like a neighboring street where I knew one of my friends lived, and she calmed me down and stuff and then took me home, and he just drove off. Didn't care whatsoever where I was, or didn't try to come look for me. He just drove off, and then he proceeded to yell at me for even longer for, 2, 3, 4 hours again, and did like his whole lecture thing about how I wasn't trustworthy, and, how could I do that to him? And it didn't matter, it didn't matter what I did. He was just a very evil person.
Right. I mean,
And
often, yeah, I mean, often that's the best way to explain them. People who can do that sort of thing, like that's not out of emotional, like, I mean, there is emotional immaturity that comes with that, but it's not purely because they don't know better. It's because they're choosing that. Like there are times when somebody could yell at you or talk to you in a way and then check themselves. And,
right.
so often, like, how else would you refer to a person like that besides just an evil person?
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, the look in his eyes when he would get aggressive or like throw things at me. I mean, he had thrown like knives at me, or like fans, or he'd broken probably 3 or 4 phones in a matter of like a year. It was just scary,
Yeah.
but it's so weird how it happens though, because you don't realize it's that bad, because it'd be like one really big blow up and then he would be calm and fine for like a month or two.
Right.
And so it's very subtle. And I think that a lot of women like don't know when to leave because they don't understand, it's only this one time, or, I
Right.
just messed up this one time and everything will be fine after that. It's abuse isn't always every day.
Right.
You know?
And it's so spaced out, like they can't see the pattern yet. And hindsight's always 2020. Looking back, you can see those things. But in the moment, it just seems like it's so spaced out that you're not recognizing,
Right.
that happening over and over again. When you think back onto that, is there like one red flag that you can think of and be like, that was when I should have been done and I wasn't, and I should have caught it then?
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely say like once the isolation started, within like
Mhm.
that first year, when I noticed that, he started to get kind of mad at me if I wasn't hanging out with my friends, or, he started that narrative of, you need to isolate yourself from your friends just so you can focus on God. I mean, that's when I should have realized that like nobody that loves you would ever do something like that. Codependency is not okay. You do have to have other people.
Right.
I couldn't talk on the phone. He would get mad if I was on the phone, even with my mom.
Right.
It became like a daily thing to delete text messages just because I didn't want him to go through my phone and like me say the wrong thing to somebody, or,
Right.
be venting to somebody and then he find out about it.
Walking on eggshells, trying to hide stuff. How soon did the physical stuff happen? And was that happening often, or was that happening more and more towards the end? Or what did that look like?
I think the physical abuse wasn't, it probably happened maybe 5 or 6 times within a 9-year period.
Hmm.
So it was mostly the emotional stuff.
Right.
I mean, it was when he would have those talks with me, I mean, I would just be like in a corner, like bawling, because
Right.
it was just like chipping away at my soul.
Right. I was
Just
gonna say, I feel like emotional abuse is worse because like you can heal your body, but words do cut deep. They can't physically hurt you, but like that takes away like your self-esteem. It's like cutting down your confidence. It's really, I think it's worse because it's something you really can't take back. And it takes so much more work to heal a broken mind than it does a broken bone.
Yeah.
And not that it's okay to ever get hit, but you know what I'm saying? Like enduring that for that long is, yeah, it would definitely take a toll. And I do understand that. I grew up in a household with a lot of domestic violence. And so I have not necessarily had it at me, but watching it unfold and just seeing how scary it is, just on the outside looking in, I can't imagine how scary that would be to have that coming at you. And then in your own home, I mean, that's supposed to be your safe place. You're supposed to be able to go there and like let loose and be yourself. And I would also like to say, as a person of faith, that I'm sorry that you had to have a run in with a person that was going to use God against you, because any person who truly is honest to God, trying to follow God, doesn't treat people like that. And unfortunately, there's a lot of that, especially in the churches and in Christianity. I want to apologize on behalf of that, that's not acceptable. And you should have never endured that. And I'm just sorry that that's an experience that you even had with that.
Yeah, I've been gone for 4 years now, and I mean there are still times when like he's still like in my head,
Right.
where I start to like second guess, like, is this my thought or is this his thought?
Right. Right.
Because listening to those lectures for hours and hours on end, eventually, it's almost like it becomes your own thoughts or your own
Right.
opinion,
Right.
and like, do I believe this? I mean, there were such young years of my life, I was from 18 to 27. So, I mean, those are like supposed to be the prime years of my life.
And your brain is still developing at that time. Like your brain does not actually fully develop until you're almost 30. So like you're still developing all of those things that your prefrontal cortex is going to develop. And so to go through that for such a majority of that time, it takes a toll. I mean, it would take a toll on anybody, but then also when you're literally training your brain to be a developed brain and to have that on top of you, that's hard to work away from.
It definitely is. I'm definitely a lot more healed now, but it's taken 4 years,
Right.
to even get to where I'm at now. And I still, he still sees his kids, so I still have to see him once a week. But even with the kids, even after I left, he still has that weird manipulation with them.
Right.
His perception of masculinity is so askewed and so wrong.
Right.
These young boys, he won't let them have Princess Peach toys or silly things that he thinks are supposed to be masculine. But he even tries to control that. He'll like throw them away, or he doesn't even ask to see them anymore, like just once a week for like 6 hours.
I know you mentioned that you left during your lunch break. So I wanted to know what led up to that. What made you make that decision? Just kind
Sure.
of the ins and outs of that. Like what did that look like?
All this talk about narcissism and that personality disorder. And the more women started talking about it these last 5 or 6 years, it really saved me because
Right.
I started watching this YouTube video. I was working from home. I was listening to some YouTube videos, and there was a psychologist that was talking about narcissism and talking about the different ways that they manipulate. And it just clicked. It was just like, he does all of these things. And I kept thinking about it. And I called my friend and I said, I think he's a narcissist. I think that there's something wrong with him. I'm not happy where I'm at. I cry every day. I don't feel good about myself. I don't really even want to live. My whole soul was just gone. You can even tell in pictures. And that's when she said, well, then just go. And, I made some excuses as to why I couldn't go, because, he didn't technically do anything like right now. It had been like one of those stints where things were calm for a little bit. But I just knew that it was coming. I always
Right.
did.
Right.
And she said, just go. If you're going to do it, just go. And I started packing. And I clocked out for my lunch, packed anything that I could. I packed some of my kids' stuff and went to my mom's house and called the daycare, made sure to pick them up early, and then went back to my mom's house and locked the door. For some reason, he had gotten off early that day too, which was very weird. It was almost like he knew. He went to the daycare, tried to pick up the kids, they weren't there. And then he went to the house and seen that I had taken, a lot of our belongings. And then he went straight to my mom's house and, started calling me and texting me. We can work through this. What's wrong? What have I done wrong? And my mom went out there and he talked to my mom for probably 2 or 3 hours of just like smooth talking, like,
Right.
oh, she's just upset, she's just having a moment, everything's gonna be fine, just tell her to come outside, let me talk to her. But I knew from watching those videos that if I talked to him, he would talk me into coming home. If I would have spoke to him, he would have talked me into it. I would have calmed
Right.
down, and then I would have been in trouble when I got home.
Right.
Once there was nobody around,
Right.
because
Of
that's how
course.
he would do it. Everyone thinks he's nice. Everyone thinks that he's this really good guy. He worked for this Christian friendliness organization, did
Right.
all of these things, and behind closed doors, he was horrible.
Yeah, that's the mask that they hide behind. My mom, I was actually raised by a narcissist. And when I decided to go no contact, I had someone say, she seems so nice when I see her. I'm like, yeah, that's because she's really good at customer service.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, they're so good at that.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, I would like say to him, like, you're a sociopath. There's something wrong with you. There's seriously something wrong with you. And the weird smile that he would get when I would say that,
Like he liked it.
almost like he was, yeah, like he was proud. Like he was proud because he knew that like psychopaths and sociopaths are smart. And that was something that he always like prided himself on, is being very smart. And he would kind of use that in these lectures to make it seem like, I don't know if you can keep up, but let me break it down for you.
I hate that. That's like one of my biggest pet peeves is when people use like condescending tones. Oh, it makes my blood boil.
Yeah.
To hear that he's seemingly proud is just, oh, it's just disgusting. So when you did that and you went to your mom's and he talked to, what were all of the like thoughts and feelings like coming up for you in that? Because I know it has to be very scary. Like what ifs, what was
Yeah.
going on through your head when you finally decided to do that?
Honestly, I was relieved. I mean, I cried for a few hours because it was just like all of these emotions were just finally coming out. He didn't like when I would cry. Like he would do it more if I cried. He would yell at me more, scream at me more when I cried, and he liked it.
Right.
And eventually I was just such a shell of a person that I didn't show any emotion at all because I didn't want to give him the satisfaction. So once I like got in the house and I got my kids in the house, and they were only 9 months old at the time, and I cried for a long time. I just felt so relieved.
Right.
I didn't even
It's
want to, I didn't text him back. I wouldn't call him back. I didn't talk to him for probably 2 weeks
right.
because I just didn't want to make a mistake of saying the wrong thing, because if you say the wrong thing, then they like build on that and
Right.
then use that to manipulate you to come back.
Right. This is kind of an interesting question that just popped into my head because I know for me, there has been grief with not having contact with my mom, but it's also a different dynamic because she's my mom. Did you have any level of grief mixed in with those emotions, like for the good times that you had? Or was it solely like you were just to the point where you were like, even the good stuff doesn't matter because he's such a bad person?
I do weirdly still miss him at times,
Right.
because when the good times were good, like they were really good. Got along really well. We had the same interests. We spent almost 10 years of our lives together. That's a long time, and a long amount of years to just be like growing and stuff as people into
Right.
adults. So it's a weird feeling, because like there's been times when I pick up or drop off the boys and I catch myself like enjoying our conversation a little too much. Like I don't mean to, but like that chemistry is still there. Obviously, like I would never,
Right.
ever
No, I
again.
totally get that because there's times where I'm like, good times can still be good and I still don't deserve to be treated like crap. It's been so hard to explain to my kids because I stopped talking to my mom when my oldest was 5. And so explaining to her that, yeah, you used to be able to go over there. We live just a couple blocks from her. And they're like, can't you say something? And I'm like, it doesn't work with her. And it's so hard to explain narcissism to a
Right.
child. And like now, like, your kids are 5, like, and he is still seeing them. There's going to end up being conversations that are coming up. And it's like, how do you have that conversation? They said, I hate your mom. And I said, I love my mom because she's my mom. And sometimes if people don't treat you right, it's okay to remove yourself from that because no one deserves to be treated in such a way or have their boundaries crossed. So we try to like have like for them, it's like little brief things of just like, no, I mean, I'm not horrible for not wanting to see my mom. But at the end of the day, like she was great with my kids, but she wasn't great with me. And I didn't want them to grow up dealing with the same stuff as they got older. And she was able to do that. It's a really hard conversation to have. And I think it's so complex that so many people don't understand. And they're like, well, then you just need to leave. But the attachments and the trauma bonds that go with that run so deep. It's so hard to remove yourself from that. And I had a similar thing like that. You said when you watched YouTube and it kind of clicked for you and you knew it was going to happen. I was the same way. I started watching TikTok during the pandemic and I
Yeah.
hired a business coach who was very set in mindset, and I could tell I was getting stronger, and I
Yeah.
knew that the next time something happened was going to be the end. And as soon as it started, in my heart I just knew like this was it. And
Yeah.
so I can definitely understand where you're coming from with that. Even in some of the worst relationships, there's still something that brought you together. There's still something that was fun, like at the time. And it's almost like people want to make it so black and white, like you either love them or you hate them, and it's really not. There's so much gray
No.
area especially when it comes to things like abuse, and not having the conversations around it enough when people don't quite understand it. It's a really deep and it's a very hard topic. Have you had to have any conversations like that with your kids?
Yeah, it's definitely been very rocky as far as the boys and their relationship with their father, because the first instance was probably a few years ago. One of my sons, he had some potty training issues. I go to pick him up and he's like bawling, and I'm like, honey, what's wrong? What's wrong? And he couldn't even breathe. And so I just hugged him. Their dad came out and he's like, nothing's wrong with him. Don't worry about it. I'm like, what happened? Don't worry about it. Nothing's wrong with him. And so I started, I put the kids in the car and I start to drive away, and he's still like couldn't catch his breath. And so I pulled over the car and I just embraced him. I said, honey, what happened? And he said that he had an accident and that his dad hit him in the face. And to have that happen to your son, when you're trying to do the right thing and, you're trying to not be that vindictive mother, and you just like, you don't want that for your kids, but that they're going to have to like figure it out as well. You know what I
Right.
mean? On who he is.
Right.
Eventually. And if you don't give them space for that, then eventually they're going to be mad at you for,
Right.
just going no contact, all in all. And he had never done something like that before that. So, of course, I called him and yelled at him and was like, how dare you? He's a 3-year-old little boy that
Right.
is just learning how to go potty. And then the boys chose not to see him for like a few months. And he kept texting me, saying that I was overreacting and, how could you keep me from my sons? And I didn't really hit him and I didn't do this. And it's like, a 3-year-old is not, they don't have the logic to be able to filter that type of information. That's what
Mhm.
happened,
Yeah. And
I'm
especially not to fake being worked up like that. Like
right.
there's no way a child would be able to make themselves that worked up to lie and say that that happened.
Right. Through all of this, I've learned to just listen to my kids. And so if they decide that they don't want to see him, then they don't want to see him. Every Saturday, I would say, do you want to see your dad today? No. And
Right.
this went on for a few weeks. And eventually, 2 or 3 months later, I said, would you like to see your dad today? And they said, yeah, but just for a little bit. And I said, okay, I know he's a horrible person, but I don't think that like he would do that. Like they've never came home with bruises or,
Right.
or anything crazy like that. So they started seeing him again. And then there's another instance a year and a half later where my other son said that he didn't want to see daddy. And I said, why? And he said, because daddy said that I can't dance. Dancing is for girls. And daddy said that I can't watch Trolls because apparently Trolls is too feminine for him. So we went through it again. Okay, you don't want to see your dad, then you don't have to. And
Right.
I've just kind of, when it comes to the kids, I've just kind of taken their lead. And if they don't want to see him, then they don't have to. And I'm
Right.
okay with him only seeing them one day a week
Right.
because they're just so kind and they're just such the opposite of him. And I don't want that meanness and that anger to affect them. And I mean that's why I left. I'd love to say that like I left for myself, but
Right.
I didn't. I left because I had two young boys who I didn't want to like grow up and be that. And And I
Right.
knew that if I stayed, they would only just be learning from that and they would
Right.
see all of that chaos and it would continue to repeat the cycle. And then eventually, they would become young men and have that same toddler emotion, whenever anything goes wrong.
Right. And I mean, that's the best thing you can be doing for them is giving them that autonomy to decide for themselves and being that safe space for them. There was something I had seen, and I'd probably just completely butcher what the statistic is, but it's something like as long as you have one parent that you form a secure attachment with, you being able to basically be a whole person and be securely attached very much increases. And I can't remember the specific statistics, but it's interesting because, a lot of times we think that it's going to be super detrimental and it definitely takes a toll. It definitely has a place and shows up in certain ways. But I know for me, it made me feel much better knowing that it really only takes one person showing them what it's like to be secure and hold that space for them and validate them for them to understand what that looks like and to kind of combat the negative things that are going to happen in their life. Because I mean, whether it's in a relationship or at school with bullies or what, there's going to be negative things that happen in their life. And having at least one person help them build up that resiliency and that self-respect and those boundaries, that's going to benefit them so much. So props to you for doing that and holding that space to that for them. That's what's going to help them grow up to stay the kind people that they are.
Right.
What does everything look like now that you've left?
Well, I mean, the last couple years haven't really been that great. They are now. They're slowly getting better. Actually, 2 weeks after I left the boys' dad, I lost my job, which was just devastating because I had already dealt with this devastating thing of leaving somebody I had been with for so long, and then I ended up losing my job for something so little. It was very, very small, but they let me go. It was during the pandemic, and I think they were just trying to weed out some employees or whatever the case is. So, I mean, that happened, but honestly, it was a fresh start at the same time because then shortly after that, you kind of go through, I kind of went through my 20s a little bit again, because I didn't really get that opportunity before.
Right.
It was kind of hard for me to learn how to learn who I was because I
Right.
really didn't know who I was. I had spent all of the years that everyone was experimenting and figuring out who they were. I was, dealing with all this abuse and all of this control. And so
Right.
I went a little crazy for a little bit.
As you do, right? Like you were being who he wanted, not who you wanted.
I realized that people do like me, and that I am fun and I am beautiful and I have an awesome sense of humor and I am very likable. And I think that after being with somebody for that long, I mean, it took all of me,
Right.
so it just took a really long time to really build that back up
Right.
because I really didn't know who I was or who I wanted to be. I went to therapy for a little bit. Of course, at therapy they diagnosed me with PTSD because I
Right.
was having nightmares every night that I was afraid that he was going to come to my house or kill me or something
Right.
crazy. I noticed that after a while, I feel like therapy it can be good for some people, but I felt like I was just kind of reliving things.
Right.
I felt like I got worse. And
Right.
so, honestly, getting out of therapy and just doing things like working out and walking and being outside,
It's
being
that
with
self-care.
friends.
Right.
Yeah, I feel like that's really what got me out of that. That's
Right.
what helped me the most.
I had an episode about like coaching versus therapy, and I always say like I think they go great hand in hand. When you're coaching, you're moving forward, and when you're in therapy, you're going back and like digging up those roots. And and I have a terrible memory from my childhood, and I've had those thoughts. If I do start to remember, do I really want to bring that back up if I'm doing so well right now? For some people, healing can only help if you're not reliving it. Like you can
Right.
push that, or you have to heal enough in one way to be able to be strong enough to go back and like
Right.
rehash that and like heal those parts of you. And so it looks different for everybody, and that's completely normal. But self care is always, always beneficial. It builds up those reserves. When you can show yourself love again, it just makes a more peaceful life at home, at work, whatever.
I did do customer service for a few years, which I felt like definitely helped my confidence as well. Being around people, that's kind of what I was missing, which I'm
Right.
sure a lot of moms can relate that
Yes.
got to make sure that you socialize and talk to other people that aren't asking you for juice and stuff all the time. So
switching and uprooting your life is always going to take some time, and I think that's something that people also fear is like, what if it's harder? And I mean, it probably is because, you can go from the comfort of knowing what to expect into the discomfort of having no idea what it's going to look like. You said it is starting to get better. So how are things looking for you now?
Now, I mean, they're amazing. I mean, now I just need to find a man that's nice. So since I
Right.
finally feel healed enough to do so.
Right.
But yeah, things are wonderful now. It was kind of cool. Like after I'd left and everything, I took a job selling cars, which
Oh,
was
wow.
like something I never had done before. And that was pretty awesome because I got to talk to people and learn about the car business and the ins and outs. But I would never have been able to do that if I was with him because
Right.
that's not stable, or he wouldn't like me being around a lot of men all the time too. Obviously,
Right.
in a very masculine environment.
Right.
Yeah, it's been a long journey. I can finally say now that like I'm at peace. I work out every morning, I go to work, I come home, I play with my kids. I'm in a stable home. It's peaceful. I actually like being alone, which at first like being alone felt really really uneasy to
Right.
me. And now I've just like really embraced it, and it's nice to get that just being in your own thoughts and just being able to have your own peace and protect that. I will say that I'm still kind of learning to not be alone too much,
Right.
because that's not good either.
Right. Like where that
Because
balance of isolation versus like actually just
right,
needing alone time. Yeah.
right. So I mean that's definitely still a little bit of a struggle, but I mean I'm just God, I'm so much happier. I'm like a totally different person than what I was.
That makes my heart so happy.
It,
And by the way, no one can see this recording, but you are beautiful. I just needed to say that
chat.
because I'm like, no one can see these videos, and yeah, you
I
are.
don't want to see this.
Okay. I guess my last question is if you could give anybody else one takeaway, if there's something you're like, if you hear nothing else out of this, I want you to walk away with this, what would you say to someone who's in a similar situation that you were?
I would say to just do it. Get out of there. If you have a friend, if you have a close family, I promise it's so much better on the other side. It's so much better to be with people that are building you up and just supporting you. There's so much more in this world than just a man, to be honest. Making yourself happy is so much more rewarding than seeking it from other people. I think that sometimes that people think that like just because you're not being hit that it's not abuse, and that's not true. That's
Mhm.
not true. If they're putting you down every day, if they're isolating you from your family and friends, something's wrong, because somebody that loves you wouldn't do that. And it's okay to not be okay too.
Mhm.
Showing your emotions is really letting it all out. It's okay to start over. Even if you're 30 or 40 or 50, start over.
Right.
Being okay with yourself alone is so much better than being in that, because I felt alone, even with him.
Right. I can imagine. I want to thank you so much for opening up because I feel like this was such a good call. And I think a lot of people need to hear these stories. I've heard so many people that have been through different scenarios similar to this. And it just seems it like we talk about domestic violence as such a blanket thing and we don't talk about the ways that it differs and it can be so unique. And like you said, those little red flags that people don't think about, or they just say, oh, this is just a flaw a person has. And so I really think we do have to have more of these conversations, especially in the realm of like, I'm a parent coach because I want to help families as a whole. And you can't raise healthy families and you can't change society with healthy families and create those ripples being beat down every day. There is no growth in that. I'm glad that you like stepped up to say something about this because I know it's also very hard to talk about it and put it out there. I think so many people are going to get something out of this, and this could be the thing that clicks for them, that they say, you know what, enough's enough and I'm going to move forward with my life and change my life and save myself. I do just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for sharing that because I know it's not an easy topic to share. Are you opposed to people reaching out and talking to you if they're in a
No,
situation and would
no,
like
not
support?
at all. As a matter of fact, currently right now, I have somebody that's actually living at my home temporarily because she's dealing with a domestic violence situation. She had no one. I mean, she just called me one day and took the bus to my house. another thing that people need to understand, that like for family and friends, even if you're not going through domestic violence, like be open to helping them, because these shelters, they're not okay. They're gross. There's drugs and they're dirty, and it's so sad.
Right.
And yeah, just trying to be open and supporting your friends who might be struggling with things like that. I think a lot of people should do that too.
Well, where can people find you if they want to reach out? And I'll put it in the show notes too, but I just want to get that.
I mean, I'm just on Facebook.
Okay. No, that's fine.
My Snapchat is TayG2525.
There you go. All right. I'll make sure I'll put those in there because yeah, I think especially talking to someone who has gone through it too, has that experience is also helpful because sometimes if they don't know what it's like and you're talking to somebody, it can almost lean into that toxic positivity. When you don't know what it's like, then you're like, oh, well, things can get better, like, and you're almost just as delusional because they don't know any better. And so, yeah, I definitely think building that network of people who understand what you've been through or have been through it or have a similar situation can be super helpful too. So I'm thankful that you're also willing to speak to people on it.
If anyone ever needs any help or needs somebody to talk to, I'm definitely open to that.
So, well, again, thank you so much for sharing and being vulnerable with us. And we're so grateful for you.
Remember, you are powerful, you are worthy, you are valued, and you are loved. Keep pushing, keep loving, and most importantly, keep believing in your amazing ability to empower your legacy.